and thank you to the organizers for putting on the festival and for having me here. So let's start from the opening images. And what are we going to be talking about today? I will talk to you about planetarity, which is a way of engaging with our planet as a problem, and we'll do that, of course, in the context of photography. The planet, specifically our planet Earth, is looking quite enfeebled here. So in my work, I'm interested in images of our planet in all its vulnerability due to the climate crisis, the Anthropocene, the sixth extinction. But I'm also interested in the planetary scale of images, especially mechanically produced images, photographs, synthetic images resembling photographs. And I'm also interested, as the second image illustrates, in the way we perceive the planet. We see the planet, we see ourselves as planetary beings, but also as the way that the planet looks at us, directly or in a mediated way through machines, big and small. Photography is particularly important to my planetary inquiry, the reason being that today we are not only constantly photographing, but also being photographed by machines of various dimensions and scales. All these images are feeding machine learning databases, which are then used to generate new images. We are also being constantly observed by human and mechanical eyes. So I want to propose that we now find ourselves living in what I call the perception machine, which is also the title of my new book. And there is something planetary or even cosmic about this concept, as you can see in the cover image. So describing a technical universe of images and their infrastructures, the perception machine names a socio-political condition resulting from the automation of vision and imaging. But it also serves as a description of a large-scale universe of images and imagination. Now, when I was finishing the book, AI-driven text-to-image models burst onto the scene. And so you could see that the book was kind of almost prophetic with this idea of our photographic future, trying to predict what's going to happen when the likes of DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney appear and take over. As you can no doubt tell, this grid of images was automatically produced through a text-to-image generator. That was a DALL-E 2, actually. It was done in June 2022, so as soon as it appeared kind of publicly. Trained on text-image pairs, the DALL-E model responded to the words from the book's title, Perception Machine, Our Photographic Future Between the Eye and AI. The AI-generated images echo the famous avant-garde poster from 1924 by Alexander Rodchenko, which features a black and white image of a human eye, two cameras, and a doubled face of a young man. And it was accompanied by the inscription in Russian saying "Kino Gwaz," kino eye. Interestingly, the DALL-E model seems to have treated the inscription it created as an image rather than text. So we know these models are not very good yet at telling the difference between words and images, as evident by the more fascinatingly absurd variations it came up with. Anyway, the reason I'm interested in this little kind of slide between images, texts, and that prediction of the eye that looks into the future, while also looking at the past images from the early 20th century, it's because I'm kind of trying to revisit that avant-garde revolutionary gesture that was present in early photography, also in early cinema. Early photography in the works of Rodchenko, works of Vertov in cinema, they were works of Moholy-Nagy, who believed that photography as this new mechanical medium was endowed with a revolutionary potential. It could change the world because it could change the way we see the world. It could offer us literally a new vision. So the question arises today, about 100 years later, where can we find such an avant-garde gesture? Is there any point even looking for it? Would this avant-garde gesture lie with AI? Is AI a threat? Could it be a promise? Or is there somewhere else or something else that we should try and look for with a view to seeing some openings? So in my work, which is both theoretical and practical, I'm a university professor teaching media philosophy at King's in London, but I also am an artist. I've got a photographic and photomedia art practice, and I try to always kind of work with the two together. So my approach embraces different perspectives and viewpoints, from macro to micro, from astro to neuro, and with this I offer rescaling as a feminist gesture aimed at dealing with various planetary problems in a non-hubristic, on-the-ground way. And say the book is available open access, so it can be downloaded for free from MIT presses. So it's available. You don't have to buy it. Anyway, let's start from photography and scale. More images, as we all know and participate in, are being produced, shared, and seen today than ever in history. We are constantly photographing and being photographed, with imaging machines large in scale, capturing our every move. In the publicity for their Galaxy S21 phone, Samsung announced that they were enacting a revolution in photography. Thomas Dvorak and Jussi Parikka proclaimed, through the title of their edited collection, that photography has gone off the scale, while Lev Manovich, whose Cultural Analytics Lab and the accompanying book have investigated how we can see a billion images, declared, photography is young again. So we've got here these kind of pronouncements about how it's amazing, how there is too much of it. In the meantime, Andrew Dewdney, who's a co-director of the Center for the Study of the Networked Image in London, recently published a book with a title that is a make no mistake exhortation, Forget Photography. While Ariel Goldberg and Yazan Khalili, who run a photography program at Bard College in the US, declared, we stopped taking photos. So something is therefore clearly going on around photography with these very contradictory pronouncements and emotions around it. Picking up on those opposing statements and affects, the notion of our photographic future I've proposed, and I'm proposing to you today, is something of a dare, a provocation. It probes this polarized decisiveness around photography while suggesting that the photographic medium can't be so easily forgotten or abandoned because it has been actively involved in the shaping of our present onto-epistemological horizon and its technical infrastructures. Nor can photography be simply replaced by the more encompassing and perhaps more technically accurate concept of imaging, as there is so much invested in it on the level of platform capital, technical memory, and human affect. But the postulate of our photographic future also entails a reckoning with the fact that as part of its technical and social activity, the photographic medium itself is undergoing a transformation. So the book has a preface made up of collages, which are serving as a kind of visual introduction to the key ideas that I'm dealing with, and collaging is also my kind of theoretical conceptual method. So I'm going to walk you through this preface, these images, while talking over them, so you get a sense of where the project comes from and where this idea of a photographic future comes from. So photography, its role as a printed memento or evidence of fact confined to the dustbin of history, photography is currently being reconfigured in a way that has a profound significance for our individual self-image, our society, economy, and politics. The distinction between image capture and image creation is now increasingly blurred in photogrammetry, computational photography, CGI, or algorithmic image generators trained on photographic images. And even so, though my talk is about what could be described as imaging after photography, this after doesn't signify an overcoming, but rather a form of mediation, a process that doesn't erase the technical, historical, or affective traces of its formative medium. Importantly, and in line with a widespread retention of this term in computation, the imaging industry, and last but not least, its social use, my working definition of photography, even if applied to images, whose kind of method of production exceeds this writing with light technique to embrace calculation and selection, is itself experiential. So it names a practice that, for the human observer, looks and feels like, resembles, or hints at photography. Even though I'm very much interested in the influence of AI on the production of images, I'm not so keen on the postulated shift from the photography to synthetic images. Because when weren't mechanical images synthetic? When was photography natural or authentic? We can think about, early spirit photography, when people photographed themselves with their dead relatives. Well, not really, but they created ghosts that, and they tried to pretend that they were that they were actual ghosts of deceased people. You can think about fairy pictures, Cottingley fairies, girls from Yorkshire cutting out like wings and creating these creatures, and then half of Europe believing that they were real fairies. So collage, avant-garde collages. So photography's always had this synthetic dimension to it. Importantly, the interrogation of photographies and photographic future highlights a number of concerns regarding not just the status of a specific industry or media practice, but also some larger, or we might even say planetary level concerns about our human positioning in the world and our relationship with technology, at a time when our very existence is being increasingly challenged by attempts to envisage what comes next: a climate collapse, cross-species extinction, another pandemic, a third world war, death by AI, or maybe a sunny tomorrow for all of us. Now, this may seem too big a leap right now, but I want to suggest that by wondering with Judney and others whether photography has any future, we are actually using this specific cultural technical practice to ask whether everything else we know, including us humans as a species with particular cultural exigencies and technical affordances, will soon be over too. We are therefore using photography, a par excellence practice of imaging and imagination, a practice of copying, making likenesses, mapping, making mental pictures, and ideating, often on a vernacular plane, although not always in a fully conscious way, as a way for asking bigger questions about our own situation in the world. It's a questioning which unfolds at a time when not only vernacular photography, but also our very sense of being here in the world is being challenged for many of us, refugees, climate crisis victims, people, victims of precarity of employment. So what precipitates this line of thinking about photography in existential terms is the fact that some of the boldest and most surreal forms of generating novel images and forms of imagination are being offered today by algorithmic agents, be they GAN networks or AI models such as DALL-E, Midjourney. Imaging and imagination are therefore now part of a planetary computational architecture described by Benjamin Bratton as the stack. And it's in this sense that photography can be read as a case of what Swedish philosopher Amanda Lagerkvist has described as existential media, media that are capable of accounting for the thrownness of the digital condition, of the digital human condition. This existential mode of inquiry gets us to ask what comes after the human, while inviting us not just to imagine, but also to image it. So in the light of the current developments around AI and the impending climate crisis that we seem to unable to truly imagine, this interrogation is really kind of particularly timely and urgent. And this is, again, I was just playing with this when the engine came out and the book was going into production, so I asked DALL-E what our future will look like. And, on the surface, it looks quite good, like very bright and colorful, except when you're looking again and you can see that, okay, it used to be a river, but the river's disappeared and it's a huge drought there. And then you're looking at kids' heads and their heads are literally exploding with pixels, but maybe also was trying to imagine that future. So looking good and yet not quite. So the key problem I'm investigating in the book concerns the future of mechanically produced images that come after, resemble, and are still called photographs, and the future of us humans as producers of and as beings produced by such photographic and after-photographic images. With the current outpouring of images, we can suggest that photography is encountered by us principally as a flow, be it on social media, on multiple screens in urban spaces, at festivals like this one, or as flickering data points in computer vision databases. Yet photographic flows don't just flow. They often slow down, come to a halt, or wrap around us, creating photo envelopes which offer a particular way of encountering and sensing the world. As well as foregrounding the flow aspect of the medium, it's therefore important to highlight that photography is experienced in the first place, that it comes to us as an experience, and also, more crucially, that it envisages and forms experiences. Photography triggers and shapes emotions, drives our percepts, informs our cognition, and contributes to the emergence of human consciousness. We should note here the possibility of other modes of experiencing photography than just the visual, with a broad range of sensory experiences activated in the photographic process between a variety of human and non-human agents. My understanding of photography here borrows from Willem Flusser's theory of the image, whereby it's the technical image itself that is the message. Informing or giving form becomes a way of organizing the chaos of the world in an attempt to slow down entropy, to hold the end of the universe. This position extends the earlier claims about the formative role of photographs in our lives made by writers such as Roland Barthes, Pierre Bourdieu, or Susan Sontag. But it also recognizes that the primary role of images today, including photographs, is informational. Information is understood here in the classical engineering sense proposed by Shannon and Weaver in their mathematical theory of communication as being non-semantic, with a communication model applying to different agents, human and non-human ones. The principal meaning of an image is that there is an image and that it is being transmitted rather than it's an image, say, of a cat. Although, of course, images of cats do matter to individual humans. Yet the photographic image today is not just seen, and it's most certainly not always seen by humans. It's also always tagged, categorized, copied, coded, transmitted, networked, and platformed as part of the operations of the perception machine. The photographic image, therefore, does something. It relates to another image or data sequence. It triggers the execution of a command within the machine, rather than just meaning something to humans. The theoretical impulse behind my interrogation of our photographic future comes from the work of Flusser. Not only his well-known photographic writings, but also his very thought-provoking book called Does Writing Have a Future? Flusser answers his own question in the negative, foreseeing a time when books become an obsolete medium. He was writing in 1985, so you can ask, are we here yet? Have we arrived at that moment? So on the one hand, Flusser was writing lots of books himself. On the other hand, he wasn't very optimistic about the future of writing, but neither was he very pessimistic about that lack of future for the writing. He was just thinking, oh, well, go on. Moving from texts to images, that's all right as well. So that was kind of philosophically interesting, I think. So rather than worry about our imminent bookish illiteracy, he's intrigued by the co-evolution of humans with different media. And it's this media genealogical aspect of his analysis that I extend in my work by looking at the future of the photographic medium, at the narratives about its future, and more broadly at the role of photographs and other technical images play in mapping our human future. My key proposition is that not only does photography have a future, but also that it actually is the future. As we increasingly experience reality through and as photography, the photographic medium functions as an active agent in shaping both us and the world. And also we're aware that obviously with AI, even though these images are produced, they are not photographs in that exact sense of being produced through light. They are also produced as a result of huge databases trained on photographs. So they are photographic in lots of ways. I'm picking up here on the process philosopher Henri Bergson's intimation that matter is an aggregation of images, with this aggregation or ensemble itself forming a universe. And importantly, this is more than just a poetic turn of phrase. In its recognition of the formative role of imaging in the constitution of human consciousness, as well as machine intelligence, contemporary neuroscience has strong Bergsonian undertones. But the current technoscientific conjuncture is radically changing the constitutive elements of this universe, while reprogramming or even redesigning the technical and sensory parameters of both ourselves and the world. So what does this kind of reprogrammed world look like? Today, humans in different parts of the world are less and less able to see themselves as inhabitants, or if they belong to a more privileged class, as citizens of the world. Globalization is out, probably went out with Trump, but lots of others. Instead, we are being increasingly interpolated to recognize ourselves as planetary beings. Outer space photography enabled the self-perspection of ourselves from outside. My work on imaging engages with planetary concerns, yet it's not itself produced from a planetary perspective, with the producer's eye lodged high in the sky. It's very interesting that there is an exhibition of view from above here at the festival, which kind of engages with that perspective, and quite critically as well, I think. So instead, my kind of view emerges in medias res, amidst the matter of media, the piles of techno-rubbish, the threat of organic and non-organic viruses. So even if the planet doesn't care about our existence, which is a point recently made by Dipesh Chakrabarty, this lack of care needn't or shouldn't be mutual. And it's in the mobilization of our responsibility for the planet and the modes of its inhabitation that my theoretical and artistic work is enacted. So this brings me back to the notion of perception machine that can help us grasp this planetary condition of living with and as images. So it's a little optical task for you here. So you can imagine you're going to the opticians to get your eyes tested. And it was a commission for the Cura magazine. The notion of the machine, still apt for our algorithmic society, borrows from Deleuze and Guattari's expansion of the term machine beyond its technical capabilities to encapsulate its social dimension. The perception machine is therefore an assemblage of technical, the corporeal, and the social. It's more like a system than a single object. There are multiple levels of meaning to what this concept stands for. To begin with, it has biological connotations, signifying the system of perception in human and non-human animals. The perception machine is also a technical machine, understood as an apparatus or indeed a camera. Perception here is equivalent to image making, a process of the temporary stabilization of the optical flow that involves apparatuses such as cameras, telescopes, and scanners, but also the wider technical infrastructure supporting those devices. The perception machine also names the machinic ensemble of perceiving and image-making agents. The term has connotations of the Foucauldian dispositif and Flusserian apparatus, whereby it stands for the bigger sociopolitical setup. Or as photography tutors at Bard, Goldberg and Khalili put it, referring to the violent use of images in attempts to consolidate state power, the state is the ultimate camera, the camera that eats all cameras. So the concept of the perception machine highlights the interlocking of scientific and cultural discourses in the production of images, and in the production of subjectivity and objectivity as functions of images. It may seem that my key conversational partners in the discussion of the perception machine are Western male philosophers and media theorists, and this is indeed where the conversation begins. But I come to this tradition as an unruly daughter with the aim of reweaving the texture of the established discourse on technology and the image with my own silicon thread. So in the process, I'm hoping to make the kind of rather masculine field of media philosophy a little bit more my own. Starting from the book's title, which is a hybrid of Virilio and Flusser with a twist, I aim to cut across positions, postulates, and postures to open a different way of thinking about the media. And this way of thinking also includes a making. So as I say, the book is free to download from MIT Press's website. You just have to dig a little bit for the link. But paper copies are available, but the book is also, PDFs are free. The book also has a website with a number of art projects, got 2 films on it and some other images. So it's also perfectly possible to arrive at the argument just through the visuals, ignoring the grammatological argument, if you like. So in the second part of my talk, I want to show you a couple of illustrations of all this planetarity, existential photography, what it means today, and how I'm actually trying to enact this in media other than words. So they are both examples of planetary scale photography remade via AI, where we are redefining everything, outer inner space, photography, ourselves. The first project is called Feminist with a Drone. So the project mobilized drone technology currently used in amazing amateur drone Instagram stills and YouTube videos from beautiful locations in the world. There's loads of stuff like this on Insta and YouTube, shot with GoPro, Hero cameras, and similar. So I wanted to enact a less masterful and less heroic viewpoint than this, one that is also more aware of its own technological entanglements. So my project took the form of ethnographic notes displayed with some images. So I'm going to show and read these notes to you now. They're mock ethnographic notes, of course. On the 12th of December 2020, I purchased a Rise Tello drone. Designed by industry giant DJI, this mini drone, marketed as the most fun drone ever, is aimed at teaching kids and adults how awesome flying can be. The exploration of this awesomeness was the key goal of my fieldwork. My first outing with a Tello took place on the 24th of December 2020 in a small park in a residential area of southwest London. During the flight times of up to 13 minutes, I captured a sequence of still and moving images from the height of between 2 and 10 meters. The experiment came to a halt when the drone flew away on descent. The follow-up search didn't yield any results, the situation compounded by unpropitious weather conditions and approaching dusk, with the drone then considered lost. The following day, the drone was located in a different part of the park. The experiment in testing the drone's awesomeness was resumed the following week. Some images were taken during the first flight. On its second ascent, the drone lost one of its propellers, with the propeller itself becoming lost amongst the park's vegetation. A replacement propeller was installed, but this made the drone inoperative, with the device losing the capacity to fully lift off the ground. This concluded my attempt to fly the drone and take images with it. Loss was a characteristic of my experience with the Rise Tello. Now, could things have gone any worse? Was the fieldwork conducted as part of my project a failure? Crucially, should I have bought a better, more manly and more high-tech drone? So I decided to repurpose my losses. The limited sample of images obtained from the drone's camera and their relatively low quality, coupled with the loss of the drone's functionality, led to the development of a hypothesis about the possibility of constructing an alternative drone visuality, which I termed loser images. As a feminist rejoinder to the amazing drone views from Instagram and YouTube, I offer loser images to you as a figuration that channels some of the potential of the multi-perspectival, humor-cynic worldview without falling for its grandeur of scale. This alternative form of visuality doesn't flatten the world into a postcard while excising its inhabitants of different scales from the picture. Instead, it envisages a more porous planetscape and a more entangled and messy ecology. My loser images go beyond the perfect planetary vision of the drone eye, but they also transcend the airy planetarity of much of contemporary theory, which often forgets about partial views, inhabitation, and an austerity that makes a difference. Conceptually, the project engages humor, irony, and partiality as methods for conducting work in technoscience, technoculture. I'm channeling kind of Donna Haraway here with her irreverent spirit. Those modes of effectively remodulating the traditional framework of what counts as knowledge and scholarship proper open up alternative ways of seeing and doing. Geographer Heather McLean recognizes that from a planetary standpoint, artistic activities such as hers, she performs in a queer cabaret called Fail Better, and mine could be positioned as ineffective. She fears that local sites of activism can end up looking as weak and useless in the face of steamroller-like neoliberal policies. And I kind of share her concerns, yet the accusation of weakness is itself a gendered strategy aimed at renormalizing the militant and heroic Victoria's ways of acting as knowledge producer, as artist, as political actor, as activist. So Polish philosopher Ewa Majewska has gone so far as to propose what she has termed the avant-garde of the weak, a mode of working that combines the feminist rejections of patriarchal visions of genius and creativity and emancipatory claims originating in the peripheries with their demand for an expanded epistemology, one including marginalized and colonized territories in art, history, and practice. Feminist with a Drone was therefore designed as a performance of planetarity as a research problem, but it was also already a form of research designed as a performance. Even though the methods and the tools used, a toy drone, a beach ball, may seem naive and childlike, their underlying ambition to challenge our ongoing planetary foolishness as well as our partial vision are very serious indeed. And the way I made these images, and the images I've made, only the first image in the top left-hand corner, The one with the thunderbolt in it is mine. The other images were generated through the same energy search engine. Same energy is a bit like search by image with Google, except it's a bit more mood and affect based. So I kind of created these networks of images, taking my first rubbish image, loser image in the first top front corner, and creating these families of images. The loser images figuration produced follows in the footsteps of Hito Steil, whose keen notion of poor images, and more recently mean images, has become an important trope in contemporary critical studies of the image. Steil used the term to describe lossy digital images traversing the networked personal computers of our globe. Their poverty referred to the low quality and low resolution, but also pointed to the wider condition of cultural disjuncture, where the impoverishment of many image producers and image subjects went hand in hand with the enrichment of those in control of the infrastructure. So my loser images are precisely such poor images of the world, serving as a counterpoint to the space photography and these amazing drone views of planet Earth. They are a testament to the poor quality of the camera and poor quality of the planet. There is something not quite right with them as both representations and captures. The worldview they present is out of sync, wobbly, smeary, deranged, degraded. Yet these loser images are not just mine. The concept is primarily meant to serve as a viewing, structuring, and archiving device, allowing us to develop a counter-visuality from what is already there, and an ethics of seeing and sensing the planet otherwise. And now we're moving towards a kind of closing point, but I want to show another project of mine as a kind of, last bit. So it's a second project of counter-visuality dealing with planetary scale issues while using planetary scale imaging and computation in the shape of AI to explore our photographic future under the condition of the multiple crises we are currently experiencing. Using machine learning and GAN networks to rework the best-known photofilm, Chris Marker's La Jetée, I have explored the possibilities of creatively engaging automation to outline a different vision of the future. Marker's film, capturing the sense of the material and moral destruction brought on by World War II and a premonition of a nuclear holocaust, is both a memory lesson and an exercise in how to remember well. Its post-apocalyptic tenor and its haunting narrative make it a good reference point for the current moment of the multiple crises, from the fear of the new pandemic to the renewed threat of nuclear war. So I'm going to show you a trailer from my film. Sorry, I'm having some. It did work when we tested it, so. Okay.
This is the story of a man marked by an image from his childhood. He was the son of a Roman Catholic father and a Catholic mother. His mother was an itinerant widow, and he had a sister who was a British officer. He had no family and was just a man. He would have thought of the woman as a baby. He was already a soldier, a member of the Great Army. Now he had lost all his memories. He had lost all the strength he had. He had lost his identity. When he recovers from his trance, the woman is gone, and his mother is gone. He feels the thoughts and feelings of his world, in a world where he's dead. she is in fact a gift of the world. He remembers what she said, and he tries to make sense of it. It's an idea he had once experienced. It's a mental phenomenon, he thinks. The conversation is a kind of sexual act. He's on his way to his bedroom to find out if he can talk to the woman who brought him to this world. They are without plans, without memories. They are without focus and without freedom. They are without a choice, without the right. A day goes by, and we are on our way, he tells her. A day goes by. I'm waiting for you to come with me. You will stay with me, and I will give you your dream. I'm a dreamer, a man, she says, a man who will love you. I'll follow you to the end of your life. You will be my first gift, and I will take you from here. I will have you with me forever, and I will never forget you. And you will be your friend, your God, your father, and your father will never forget you, and I will never forget you. He's a dreamer, a man who will love you.
So the script of my film was created with the assistance of GPT-2, an unsupervised language model that had been trained on a web text dataset containing millions of pages. I started by feeding the model La Jetê's famous opening line, "This is the story of a man marked by an image from his childhood." The model responded by taking the story in an unexpected direction. Any edits I did to the script were minor, with some of the language errors identified as important moments in my experiment and hence retained. The editing of the video was intuitive and consisted of my own visual and corporeal responses to both the script and the GAN images. Interestingly, the images themselves, produced by an algorithm to remake Marcus' film by picking up its key visual features, and especially features pertaining to humans, as is often the case in such generative programs trained on photos of human faces, manifested various body parts, frequently multiplied: noses, hair, eyes, kidneys, kidney-like eyes. The way generative neural networks operate is by repeatedly optimizing pixels in an image to achieve some desired state of activations. That desired state is compared against the source material, the training set. Developers frequently resort to the metaphor of a dream or hallucination to describe the working of neural nets, suggesting that such networks find patterns in images not so much in a logical, pre-programmed way, but rather by using previous data and memories as prompts for making new connections. I was aware that the playful sense of experimentation I had adopted as my method had some kind of ominous undertones as well in relation to Marcus' own film and its setting in the underground camp. So the counter-dream aspect was also important for me, given the socio-political limitations of AI technology, revealing not only gender and racial bias, but also the exclusionary and unjust logic underlying many of its founding principles. So I was curious about what AI would do to the original source material, but I knew I needed to step as both a dream catcher and analyst. Telling a gender-fluid narrative of survival as dreamt up by the film's director in co-creation with AI algorithms, the film dismantles the myth of the male savior in European history that we know from the Bible, but also that, very much the Marcus' own film is in that tradition. And it dismantles the traditional family structure that props it. The model tried to remain faithful to the spirit and sense of Marcus' opening line by reenacting the personal and global apocalypse as an Oedipal drama. The AI engines deployed in the visual and textual models ended up producing a more multi-layered show, one that unfolded as much on the gender front as it did on the humanist existential one. So we could say that, challenging the heteronormative fetishism of the apocalypse as dreamt up in the key cultural Western texts, what starts as a conversation between mother and son in La Jetée ends up in my film through a series of algorithmic glitches and a series of slippages through which in a gender vortex in which man becomes woman, mother becomes father, he becomes she, a form of kind of queer gender apocalypse. So the sense of premonition still lingers, but it's now accompanied by the possibility of an opening and a liberation. So it's a kind of different way of imaging and imagining an after-photographic future. So just a few closing words. When I was finishing the film, a newer version of the language model, GPT-3, became available, trained on many more kind of data points, generating text that mimicked human speech and discourse much better. However, the statistical analysis and the decontextualization issues, coupled with the philosophical problem of when and to whom a given meaning is actually meaningful, didn't disappear in GPT-3. They only became more obscured. The GPT-3 model was then superseded in 2022 by a much more potent ChatGPT that is still with us, a model that brought, AI-composed text to the wider public. Working with the visual and linguistic clumsiness of those earlier models in my film, such as GANs and GPT-2, allowed me to capture in my film that short span of time when those technologies were still weird enough to reveal their conditions of existence, their illogic, but also the missed opportunities underpinning their development. Ian Bogost has remarked that ChatGPT is a tool that's most interesting when it's bad rather than good at its job. So given the push to implement creative AI in routine products such as search engines, word processors, and image manipulation software, not to mention vast areas of the already banalized content creation, there will soon come a time when the algorithmicity of our own behavior merges even more seamlessly with that of AI-enabled models. It's therefore understandable that artists want to test and tease these models while we can still see and enjoy the glitch, while we can still try to map out our photographic future. So thank you very much. So the book is free to download if you're interested. And there is, and my Insta kind of serves as a playground for ideas, and it's like a research notebook. So thank you. And any questions or comments?
Thank you. Wolfgang Brückle. I've actually two questions which go into entirely different directions. First, you made a point of adding a feminist perspective to recent positions in media theory, but then showed experiments which spontaneously reminded me of something that a few generations ago had been done without drone imagery. You talked about your sort of failed experiments in a London park of random images, sloppily taken images, all testifying to the long walk or flight, in fact, of your tool. They somehow reminded me of Robert Smithson's approach to walking around in an industrial zone, where he actually tried to turn himself into a passive, a passive recording device, really, of what he had seen before turning it all into a sort of semi-fictional narrative. Isn't this? Would you think it's plausible to consider this approach, which also includes a very specific and maybe similar use of photography, a predecessor for what you've done? And what does this mean for your feminist claims? That's only one question, but maybe there's other people in the room too.
Okay, thank you. Yes, of course. I mean, no work is born in a vacuum. And when I produce work, ideas, they come out of a particular moment. Obviously, I mean, I love Smithson's work as well, and recognize the validity of the gesture of trying to do something with spaces, with looking differently, with inhabiting a space. But there is a specificity to that feminist gesture for me, which is not just in the act of doing something, but also for performing the ideal for both an artist and a philosopher, which for me is important. And I think there is a certain, maybe a different tenor maybe a certain levity as well to what I'm trying to do. So I'm very serious about my work, but I'm not serious about myself as a persona of a philosopher. And maybe because, I mean, I've been in academia and in the art world for quite a long time. I suppose I'm a little disappointed and tired of a performance of forms of authority and how the philosopher arrives and performs their knowledge, their body, they are claiming space, and even claiming, so a lot of kind of land art and the works they were still forms of claiming spaces. And I'm trying to think what happens if we open that up a little bit and claim spaces in a different way. Again, I'm not the only one doing that. There are lots of, there's a lot of attempts, people, coming from feminist theory, from queer theory, people working with kind of decolonizing positions. So opening those spaces a little bit more. But it's not just about inclusion. It's also about changing the signature and the tone in which something is performed. So I suppose that's probably where that gesture lies as well. Trying to balancing somewhere between the serious matter and taking the project seriously, and yet also kind of shifting the persona. Some, as a theorist Gary Hall called it a masked persona, but, doing something else rather than self-aggrandizing the artist or the philosopher. So that would be my answer.
Hi. I think it's interesting that you believe, I think probably quite rightly, obviously, that photography has been and is the future. And I wondered if you could say a little bit about the idea of what, Sontag says that, a capitalist society requires a culture based on images. I wonder if you could say something about how you see imagery embedded in the capitalist future, given, I suppose, given the issues that we have around the idea of images and climate change. I don't know if you understand what I mean by that, but I think that capitalism and images are integral somehow to the problems that we have around climate change. So I'm wondering if you could say something a bit about that.
Yes, obviously. I mean, images, thank you, it's an interesting question. Images obviously don't exist in vacuum, neither did they appear with capitalism. But obviously there is something specific about the intertwining of the mechanical production of images that also, and the emergence of the, mechanical forms of production that allowed the development of industrial capitalism. So, and there is a lot of research, not to mention even directly by people like, Ben Burgess's recent book about that relationship between the capitalist image. So, another line from this that would be quite significant would be around the intensification of the production of images today through AI. So, and I've been on enough panels with people from industry who still talk very much through the optimization discourse, but we can have more. And we think, well, but do we need more? And more for what? And to what purpose? I mean, sometimes more might be better for something, but not obviously always. And there are obviously resource implications, as you've printed, around that. So that overproduction of something, be they images or other goods, is also tied to the depletion of resources, and planetary resources, of course, but also like human resources in terms of, there are fewer and fewer humans who will be able to work in creative industries, so creative professions, or study even photography. I mean, British universities are obviously closing photography programs left, right, and center, or rebranding them as something else, alongside other humanities programs. So all of this is, of course, interconnected. So, except obviously it's not just a dual relationship between photography and capitalism, because there is everything else. It's like an assemblage, again, of factors and developments. And I think AI, in some sense, offers this kind of new stage of optimization, stupidly increased efficiency, which obviously has serious consequences for that, late form of capitalism, if you like. At the same time, my work is slightly different from, there's a lot of kind of Marxist critiques and very correct ones of that situation, of that status quo. And, you know, a lot of my friends, colleagues are working through that model. But I suppose I got to the stage when I'm a little bit trying to move away from what I call this kind of melancholy criticism. So we can analyze this and we can do the certain, you know, showing how things are not looking amazing, looking and both, you know, visually and metaphorically, for the planet, for a lot of humans on the planet, other beings on the planet. Images of those things often just serve as a form of celebration of precarity, decay, and they don't do anything. And I don't actually believe that images, you know, when we see a lot of images of the planet being decayed, we will suddenly reset our mindsets and become climate activists. It doesn't happen. So amongst all of this, I'm still trying to find ways that are offering something else than just kind of melancholy criticism. I recognize the need for critique and for a form of, you know, and obviously I come from a tradition of critique and thinking in a particular way. But I also want to find other ways of working through, because this is the system we've got. In my lifetime, probably won't have a better one. Obviously, so it's finding passages through that. And that's why I've brought in this kind of avant-garde of the week, because it's, I mean, we can't all be like either, you know, Doctors Without Borders or kind of climate activists. So that's the kind of path I'm trying to figure out with that. And I think it also recognizing that images do something else rather than just being in the service of kind of the capitalist framework and the perception machine. I think they also do something else. And I'm kind of here, there is my little bit of Flusserian hope of opening up the system. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, I think there was one.
I did have that second question, although it's entirely speculative and maybe doesn't make any sense at all. I was amazed by your or ChatGPT's variation on Chris Marquer's La Jetée. And what struck me is that it seemed to remind me of a key element in Roland Barthes' famous La Chambre Éclair, in that your protagonist, surprisingly, is somehow in search of his mother, if I understood that well. In his search of things past or lost, he longs for her, isn't he? And I wondered if, in combination with your ruminations on visual culture and images, which is, of course, also Roland Barthes' topic or subject, if there's a way of playfully, maybe, making sense of that.
Thank you. It's a beautiful question. Yeah, so I was intrigued about what was happening around that relationship with the mother. And obviously it's very interesting what happens to the discourse of photography in relation to Barthes' relationship to the mother and the image of the mother that kind of disappears, and the death of the mother that photography has ingrained for him. And I suppose for a long time in my work, I've been battling against the kind of camera lucida's entombment of photography as a memento mori. And I've been trying, and I think, you know, in a way you don't need me as a kind of philosopher to do that, because, you know, kids on Insta can do that, to find that exuberance of the image and playfulness and that sense of lifeness of the image, that you go with the flow. I mean, it's like, in a way, I mean, Instagram, as well as being terrible for lots of different ways, but there is also a certain exuberant vitality. So you could see Insta and other socials as quite Bergsonian in that sense, and that doesn't take away from the need for it. So anyway, so that sense of trying to overcome that sense of loss, which I understand and feel and don't dismiss, and yet I wanted something else from photography. So I was delighted with that. And obviously the relationship between the mother who is also this kind of attachment figure, and with whom something strange happens already in Marker's original film. Went really weird, you know, in my film, partly because the engine didn't know what it was doing. And it mixed all the genders, and this mother becomes a lover much more explicitly, except you don't know, the mother becomes a father, he becomes a she, all these, you know, gender, because again, the engine wasn't very good, but it was very good in another sense, because maybe the original narrative is not that amazing in its normativity, not just on the gender front, but also on the front of, you know, what victory looks like, who is a savior in culture, what kind of this narrative means. So that, I suppose, was a way of opening up that whole kind of Oedipal desire and its link to what it means to save the world and who gets to be a savior and how we... Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the afternoon in beautiful sunny Turin.